When Robert checked the receipt, his chest tightened. Not because the charge was fraudulent, not because the amount was excessive, but because for 24 hours, he had handed his credit card to a woman with nowhere to sleep, just to see what she would do. And in that moment, staring at a single transaction from Target in East St. Louis, Robert realized this wasn't about her choices at all. It was about what he had been expecting to find. Before you judge what that receipt meant, you need to understand who Robert Hayes was and why he made the decision that changed everything. So take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from as we go back to where it all started. Robert was 58 years old, successful by every metric that mattered to people who kept score. He'd built a logistics consulting firm from nothing, survived 2 recessions, and earned the respect of men who didn't give it easily. He lived in a house with too many rooms, drove a car that cost more than his father ever made in a year, attended First Presbyterian every Sunday, 3rd pew from the front, same spot for 12 years. But if you asked him when he last felt joy, he wouldn't have an answer. His father had taught him 3 things. Work harder than everyone else, trust no one completely, and never give anything away that you couldn't afford to lose. Those lessons had made him wealthy. They'd also made him lonely in ways he didn't have words for. Robert had come to believe that desperation corrupted people, that given the chance, most would take more than they needed. That kindness was a transaction, and everyone eventually showed you their price. He didn't hate people. He just expected them to disappoint him, and they rarely proved him wrong. Until her. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Robert's life quietly changed direction. He'd taken the Amtrak from Chicago to St. Louis for a meeting that ended early. Union Station was crowded with the usual chaos of travelers and tourists, everyone moving with purpose toward somewhere else. He was walking toward the exit when he saw them. A woman sat against the far wall near the old Harvey restaurant space, beneath a shaft of winter light coming through the vaulted ceiling. She was maybe 40, 45. Dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that had seen too much, and in her arms, wrapped in a coat too thin for December, a little girl slept with her head against her mother's shoulder. There was no cardboard sign, no cup for change. The woman wasn't asking for anything. She was just sitting there, holding her daughter, looking like she was trying to disappear. Something about that stopped Robert cold. He'd walked past 1,000 people in need, looked away from 1,000 hands reaching out. He'd perfected the art of not seeing what made him uncomfortable. But the way this woman held that child, protective, gentle, like that sleeping girl, was the only thing in the world that still mattered. Robert found himself walking over. The woman looked up, startled. Fear flashed across her face, the kind that comes from learned experience. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "We're not bothering anyone. We'll move." "You don't have to move." Robert's voice came out rougher than he intended. Are you okay?" The question seemed to confuse her, like no one had asked her that in a very long time. "We've managed so far," she said quietly. "I'm trying to trust that this isn't the end of it." The words landed harder than any sermon he could remember. "What's your name?" "Sarah." She hesitated. "Sarah Mitchell. And your daughter?" "Emma." "She's 7. Sarah's hand moved protectively over the girl's hair. "She's a good kid. So good. She never complains, even when," her voice caught. She didn't finish. Robert didn't ask what happened. He could see it in the worn suitcase beside them, the plastic bag holding what looked like all their remaining possessions. Life had taken something from this woman, someone, and left her here. He'd planned to offer her $50, maybe $100, enough to ease his conscience and let him walk away feeling like a decent person. Instead, he found himself pulling out his wallet and removing a black card. "I want you to take this," Robert said. Sarah stared at it. "I can't. 24 hours. Use it for whatever you need. Food, clothes, a hotel room, medicine, whatever you and your daughter need." Sir, I don't understand. Robert didn't understand either. Not really. There's no limit on it. No pin required. Just your signature. Sarah's hands were shaking. Why would you do this? That was the question Robert would ask himself for hours afterward. Why was he doing this? To prove something? To test her? To see if his father was right about people? Because you look like you could use some help, he said finally. And because you shouldn't have to make every decision afraid. The honesty of that last part surprised even him. Sarah looked at the card like it might vanish. What if something goes wrong? What if it gets stolen, or then it gets stolen? That's my problem, not yours. I need to pay you back. No. Robert's voice was firm. No strings. No debt. 24 hours. Then you give it back to me here. Tomorrow. 3 o'clock. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I promise I won't. I wouldn't. I know. And somehow, despite everything he believed about people, Robert meant it. He left his business card with her, watched her tuck the credit card carefully into her pocket like it was made of glass, and walked away feeling like he'd just done something either incredibly generous or incredibly stupid. Probably both. The waiting was harder than Robert expected. He told himself the silence meant restraint, or fear, or dignity. Mostly, it meant he was alone with his assumptions. The first alert came before sunrise. $214.89. Target: East St. Louis. Robert stared at it longer than he meant to. Too much, he thought. Too fast. He opened the receipt, bracing himself for something careless. Something that would make the explanation easier. Instead, a winter coat. Child-sized. Boots. Thermal leggings. A prepaid phone. He closed the app anyway. Another alert followed. Groceries. Then a motel charge. The total climbed, and with it a quiet discomfort he hadn't expected. This wasn't restraint. It wasn't indulgence. It was urgency, the kind that comes from believing the ground might disappear again without warning. By the time he left for Union Station that afternoon, Robert wasn't sure whether the experiment had revealed her character or exposed something meaner in his own. She arrived on time. Emma was awake now, her hand tucked into her mother's sleeve. The pink coat still had its tags folded into the pocket. Sarah handed him the card without ceremony. I used it quickly, she said. If that matters. He didn't answer right away. I bought things I couldn't risk needing later, she continued. Things that make it harder to vanish. Robert nodded, a fraction too late. He had already misjudged the moment. Emma leaned against her mother's side, heavy and unguarded, the way children do when they stop monitoring the room. Printed in faded ink on digital receipts. Cataloged in transactions that didn't explain anything at all. Sarah folded the receipt once before putting it away, careful, like it still mattered. Sarah, Robert heard himself say, can I buy you both lunch? Just, let me buy you lunch. Please. They sat in a booth at a diner 2 blocks from the station. Emma colored on a kid's menu while Sarah told Robert pieces of her story. Not all of it. Just enough. Her husband had died 18 months ago. Suddenly. No warning. The medical bills consumed everything. Then the house. Then her job when she couldn't find reliable childcare. The family had helped until they couldn't anymore. The system was complicated. Slow. Full of gaps wide enough to fall through. I'm not looking for pity, Sarah said. I'm still standing. Emma's healthy. We have each other. That's more than some people have. Where did you sleep last night? Extended stay off Highway 64. Got 2 nights for what you gave me. Figured that was better than one nice hotel. Robert set down his coffee. What if I could help you? Really help you? Not just a card for a day. Sarah's face went carefully neutral. Help how? A place to stay? Temporary. No strings. Just until you get on your feet. Mr. Hayes. Robert. Robert. She looked at Emma, then back at him. People don't do things for free. There's always something. You're right, Robert said. Usually there is. I'm offering because I can, Robert said. And because I don't want you making the next decision alone. What's that? That people don't always do what I expect. Sarah's eyes filled. I don't know what to say. I don't need an answer today, Robert said. Or tomorrow. Sarah studied him, longer than politeness required. People say that, she said, until waiting becomes inconvenient. He nodded. That's fair. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. If this is real, she said, finally, you'll still be here next week. Sarah glanced at Emma. Emma didn't look up. She kept coloring, careful and quiet, like she'd learned not to interrupt adult decisions. I need to be sure, Sarah said. Not for me. For her. The next 3 months unfolded slowly, carefully. Robert set them up in a small apartment in Belleville, Illinois. 2 bedrooms. Safe neighborhood. Close to schools. He didn't furnish it like a showpiece. He bought practical things. Dishes. Towels. A table. He connected Sarah with a workforce program at Barnes Jewish Hospital. She'd been a medical billing specialist before everything fell apart. She had the skills. She just needed the chance. Emma enrolled at a public school nearby. She corrected her teacher the first week when her last name was mispronounced. Sarah taped that paper to the refrigerator and left it there longer than the rest. Robert visited once a week. Sometimes just to drop off groceries. Sometimes to have coffee and talk. Sarah never asked him for anything. Never expected anything. She was rebuilding her life with help, not being saved. There's a difference. And Robert changed too. He started paying attention in places he used to drift through. Started volunteering at the food pantry Sarah had donated to. Started asking himself hard questions about how he'd spent the last 20 years. One Sunday after service, Sarah found him in the parking lot. I got the job, she said. Full-time. Benefits. Start dates in 2 weeks. Robert felt pride bloom in his chest. Sarah, that's incredible. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You would have found a way. Maybe. She smiled. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone. By spring, Sarah and Emma were stable. Truly stable. Not just surviving, but building something real. Sarah had her own car. A used Honda she bought outright with her first 3 paychecks. Emma was thriving in school. They'd started attending Robert's church, sitting 4 rows behind him. Robert tried to build something small. Some of it worked. Some of it didn't. He learned quickly how many ways good intentions could stall. Just a simple trust that helped families in crisis. Bridge loans. Emergency housing. Job placement. He asked Sarah to be on the advisory board. Not as a symbol. Not as a story. But because she understood what people needed when the world stopped making sense. Why me? She asked when he offered. Because you've been there, Robert said. Because you know what real help looks like. And because I trust you. Sarah smiled. You know what's funny? A year ago, I was sitting in a train station with nothing. Scared. Alone. Wondering if God had forgotten about me. And now, I don't think I was forgotten, she said. I think I just didn't know what help was supposed to look like. Robert thought about that single transaction alert at 5:47 a.m. Thought about how close he'd come to walking past Sarah that day in Union Station. How easy it would have been to stay comfortable in his loneliness and his certainty that people always disappointed you. I used to think generosity was a weakness, Robert said. That trust made you a fool. What do you think now? I think I was wrong about more than I realized. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you, Robert. For everything. Thank you, he said. For proving me wrong. Robert never deleted the alert. It stayed on his phone, buried under years of newer transactions, smaller and larger and louder than it had ever been. Sometimes he opened it by accident. Sometimes on purpose. $214.89. Target. East St. Louis. He still couldn't say exactly when things shifted. Only that before that morning, he'd been very certain. After, he wasn't.